Hi. You know, people come up to me at conventions and they say, Quinns, you've probably played more board games than anybody who's ever lived. And I have to tell them, yes, it's entirely true. And then they say why, and I say it's very simple. I'm an addict. I'm a junkie for genius. Alright? What board games represent is a kind of lossless transmission of ideas. If you get involved in some other 21st century art form, whether that's making video games or movies, your vision might not come across. But the very, very smart people who make board games, everything that they put in this box is what you receive. Their systems, their vision, it's exactly the same. And then those ideas are free to disseminate, to be absorbed by, taken up by other geniuses, and you can see these ideas spread, and that's fantastic. Do you ever think about what's cute? Is that as long as that box is closed, those ideas are essentially under... Right. Quarantine is a game that came out just this week, but to be honest, I've been excited about it since I first heard of it. There are all sorts of reasons for that. The first is that it's very, very thematic. Now, thematic games are games which have a strong theme or setting, strong enough to transport everybody around the table to an alien planet or the age of the dinosaurs or a medieval Venetian party with masks or, in this case, a hospital, which is almost as good. But actually it's okay because what you're really doing is you're trying to build the most successful hospital by placing these tiles, and that's cool, that's a bit of a power fantasy. But more than anything, you're going to be trying to build a successful hospital by engaging in the suite of ideas that the game presents, and some of these are really, really cool. Before we begin properly, let me just point out the stakes for this review. It's thematic, that's one of my boxes ticked already. That smallish box isn't very expensive, that manual isn't very big, and if these ideas work, surely it would be one of my favourite games. So, that said, let's do this properly. Let's take each of the ideas within Quarantine and put them under Quinns' operating table. Okay, so first of all, the way that Quarantine deals with your patience and income is insufferably clever. So on your turn, the first thing that happens is the player clockwise from you will reach into this velveteen bag and produce patience of a certain colour. There's a red and then there's a blue, and these guys will queue up outside your hospital. Then on your turn, you get 4 actions, these represented by these delicious looking mints, and you can spend 1 action to admit everybody into your hospital. Oh look, there's a red and he goes into the blue and he goes into the green, and then he actually stops there because there's no room in your hospital for another red. Then by spending additional actions, you can cure all patients of 1 colour. And these patients you cure are your income. This guy is essentially $1 red. Cure him, that's $1 blue. And you can use these to purchase things. But that's not the really clever bit. When you're drawing patients, you don't have to send them to your hospital. Every patient can be sent to yours or another hospital, which lets you do really horrible things like this. Oh, sucks to be you, Gingrass Medical Complex. Loser! Loser! Have fun with all those blues! How are you gonna cure all them blues? It's really difficult. Anyway, this is a fantastic puzzle for so many reasons. I mean, first off, it's a visual puzzle that people will immediately understand as soon as you explain it to them. Second off, it's risk-reward. Sending pain-in-the-arse chains of patients to your opponents is still technically giving them income if they can figure it out. Whereas maybe you should be sending yourself difficult patients on the off chance that nobody else sends you anyone and you have no money. That's interesting. And third off, it's just really elegant, doubling up on components. You don't need money and patience, you just use 1 set of cubes for both. That's really clever. I give this idea 9 out of 10. Let's keep up the pace. Let's move on to idea number 2, which relates to this central quantity of tiles. The game ends when they run out because everybody's added them to their hospital. Now, obviously, you're going to be paying those patient cube income things to get access to these tiles, but it's a bit sideways because what you do is you have to first open a contract, and this is awesome. Let's say you want a gift shop. That's a really lovely gift shop. What you do is you take some patients out of your supply, minimum of 2, and you place them on the gift shop and you place that next to your hospital. What you've done there, you haven't bought it, you've just set the price, which means as other players take their turns, they can pay 1 yellow and 1 blue and whip that out from underneath you, perhaps buying all the gift shops before it even gets back to your turn. So, you have to ask yourself, how many cubes can you afford to pay? Ideally, you want to price out your opponents, but then that just limits how many other things you can buy if they go cheap and you go high. It's just really interesting. It's interesting. 6 out of 10. Okay, idea number 3, and it's what's the most advanced technology in a hospital? You might think it's the chemotherapy ward, but you're wrong because it's doors. Okay, let's say you bought a cafeteria, and that's great because every turn you're going to get one of these cross tokens, which gives you an extra action. That's great. And then you get a supply room, which you can attach to double the capacity of a certain color that you attach it to. And wait, no, because you don't want to attach it to yellow, but then there's no doors pointing off of anything else. Oh, bollocks. So you spend your action token for a remodel, and then you swap out the red room, and then you pull the yellow room, and you insert the yellow room there, and then you can do that, and then you can finally do this, and that's pretty good. But what you really want, then remember, is don't forget, you want to build these nurses stations. By completing 4 tiles in a square, you get a complete nurses station, which is worth 1 more point at the end of the game. You're playing this wonderful little sliding puzzle game, and that's very clever. That's 8 out of 10. Okay, next up, it's the fact that there are extra special rooms, which, the rooms are as special as the other ones, but there are extra of them, because this is an equal opportunities game. But what it means is that you play with 8 special rooms in any given game of Quarantine, but there are 16 in the box, and you always mix them up, so every game of Quarantine you play will be different, which is good. It's actually not Quarantine's idea. That's pretty common in a lot of games these days, but it's still a good idea. So 3 out of 5? By this point, you're probably getting the appeal of Quarantine. You start off with something rubbish and patients are queuing up outside and it's cold, and then you start letting them in. They pour in as patients line up. You start seeing them as income rather. Oh, he can go to the emergency room. You see them as income rather than just a problem, and you start feeling really happy with what you've got. Tell you what's not going to make you happy though is the Grazels, which is the 5th colour of cube in the bag, and they just represent infection. If you draw one of these, you can place them in someone's hospital, rendering that room inoperable. And if they have a nurse's station, you can place another, as the nurses vomit on each other out of sickness or whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is that on your turn, you're going to have to spend action discs cleaning up Grazels. And this is not fun. It's just a chore. In a game where building up a strong and flexible and fast economy is the game, the Grazels feel like you're actually cleaning rather than a functional part of the economic engine. It's just not good. I give it 3 out of not good. That's it. What a lot of it. What a lot of ideas. Let's input them into the Shut Up and Sit Down supercomputer and see what it has to say. I've said this maybe a half dozen times on Shut Up and Sit Down now, but the heart of any board game is difficult decisions. If you can nail that agonizing decision that might go one way or the other, you've probably nailed at least half of your game, and Quarantine on the surface would offer that. Do you want a cafeteria or a gift shop? Are you going to take that patient or send him away? Where do you place that Grazer? Your brain will be spinning at full speed all the time, and that's great. Except all of these decisions kind of come out okay in the wash, like so much dirty hospital linen. Now, look, I'm not doing this because I'm petty and angry, but basically here's my hospital at the end of the first game we played, with tons of special rooms, and it's built in a square to maximise the number of nurses stations for all the points, and it works, and people just pour in, and they pour out, and it's like a water fountain of disease. Just fluid, is what I'm saying. But I didn't win though. And now, here's Paul's effort. And what we've got is not anything at all. You know, patients come in and they come out, and he's got a lot of them because he hasn't spent them on anything. He has one gift shop, but it's been contaminated for the whole game and he hasn't used it. Basically, it's like 4 Twixes covered in spider webs. And Paul came second with this effort. Which brings us to Rob's effort, and no, I'm not angry, I'm not, but basically Rob's hospital is shit, and we all knew it was shit, and it had this massive comedy queue of patients at it for the whole game. They were like, it was like, you know, the launch of a new iPad or something, And then he had very few nurses stations in these scattered rooms, and nothing really worked. And he had some people healed, and he won. And he literally said, "I can't have won, that's bollocks." And that's not a good thing to happen in a board game. Ideas are still my favourite thing in board games, but if quarantine teaches us anything, it's that nebulous stuff like balance and feel are more important than anything else. The problem we were running up against is that it turns out in quarantine, curing patients is actually more valuable at the end of the game than expanding your hospital. That's counterintuitive. You have to do something less fun and just cure people, and that's not actually that good. And you know what? It makes me love Terra Mystica, which we reviewed last week, that much more. I've seen people online complain about Terra Mystica's kitchen sink design. This idea that it includes all these elements which are popular, from building on the board to running up tracks and area control to special powers. But it doesn't matter, because Terra Mystica works. It just feels amazing, and more importantly, it feels fair. Quarantine does not feel fair. For this game to work, in addition to being smart, it actually also had to be as finely balanced and sharp as a scalpel, and it's not. Which means the game of disease that is still the best game of disease in board gaming is Pandemic. Released way back in the mists of 2008, and quite frankly, it still hasn't been beaten. It's more affordable than Quarantine. The box is even smaller, the rules are even simpler, and yet you and your friends are going to have so much fun defending the world from 4 different diseases, desperately trying to get cubes. Places are being infected. Oh, Kinshasa in the Congo, I don't know where that is, but now people are dying there. It's just a wonderful game of jet setting and panic. And for what it's worth, the cubes, which are plastic rather than wooden in this second edition, also look that much more delicious than in Quarantine. Do you think anyone's ever actually, like, oh my god, oh my,